Hi girls and guys, vintage divers and lovers of old scuba stuff like me. It's Alec Peirce, Scuba, Vintage Scuba. So today I want to talk about something that's come up more than a few times in the comments and so on. And because people are always asking me, how do I take care of my old mask? How do I take care of my old regulator? How do I know? So basically this is a little bit, and I may do a few of these because different scuba items require different types of care. But this is a video about caring for my vintage equipment, caring for my old scuba gear. Now, I'm assuming that you have a piece of old scuba equipment. I don't know if it's a mask or a fin or a snorkel or a regulator or a tank or whatever it happens, BC, whatever it happens to be. And again, each piece of equipment has little slight differences, but there are some things that don't change. So what I'm going to show you today, hopefully it'll be interesting for you, the principle is the same for each one. Okay, I may take some other pieces of gear that are different and show you how, specifically how to take care of those. But how do I take care of my vintage equipment? Okay, here we go. Now this particular, what I'm going to do today applies to most pieces of small equipment, okay, not regulators or tanks or BCDs, let's leave those out, but almost everything else, because almost everything else in scuba has, vintage scuba, has rubber components. And it usually has some metal components as well. Sometimes it has plastic components, although that's more common as we get into the newer age. But they all have the same types of materials. And here's some ideas. Okay, and this will apply. I have an old mask here for an example. So here's an old mask. It has a bunch of rubber. Okay, and there's some metal. There's metal clips, and there's a metal band. There's a piece of glass. Pardon me. Not plastic. So the same principle applies. So if I have an old piece of scuba equipment and I want to get it in really nice shape and then keep it for a long time, here's what I suggest you do. First of all, disassemble it completely as much as you can. All right. So if it's a mask, take the strap, the clips, all that stuff. Take it all apart carefully, because some of it's old and it might tear. Particularly old rubber parts, because unless it's been really well taken care of, the rubber is going to be cracked and dry, and you start taking things apart and prying and pulling and ripping, that's what will happen. You'll rip it, and then it's ruined. So very carefully take it apart. Now, if it's very stiff, very sticky, then you might try soaking it in warm water, even a little bit of detergent, but don't use harsh detergent. Don't use sunlight soap or a tub cleaner. Use a little bit of laundry soap, just a tiny bit of laundry soap, just to ease the process in warm water. That'll soften it up. Now here's an example. Here's an old flashlight that I found. This is old. This is from the 50s. This is an old Voit flashlight, and this is a particular interest to me because this flashlight was actually used by Mike Nelson on Sea Hunt. That's right. You vintage divers know Mike Nelson from Sea Hunt, of course. Now, what I mean is, this flashlight was not used by Mike. This flashlight was not used by Mike. So Mike Nelson, Lugbridge, has never grabbed this flashlight. No, but this is the same model. Okay, Mike Nelson's own equipment is all gone, but I have an awful lot in my Sea Hunt collection. You know, from my Sea Hunt playlist. Of the same equipment that Mike Nelson used in Sea Hunt. And this is an example. I know that this was used by Mike Nelson in Sea Hunt. This model was used by Mike Nelson because I've seen it. That's right. Almost daily. Diana, my wonderful patient wife, and I watch a Sea Hunt episode. There's worse things to do. You know, think about it. But anyway, we watch the Sea Hunt episode very frequently. And as I'm watching the Sea Hunt episodes, unlike when I was 10 years old watching Sea Hunt, where I was just, be careful, Mike, be careful. Now I watch and I see neat little things. Hey, look at that flashlight. I have that flashlight. And he had this flashlight in one of those episodes. And I write down the episode and what he was using in there. So I got this old flashlight, Voit flashlight, from the 50s. I have a copy of the page in the Voit catalog where this flashlight appears. It also appears in the U.S. Divers catalog. Voit and U.S. Divers use a lot of the same equipment. And I have one of these flashlights. It came to me, I forget how, and it was complete. I had the mechanism inside to hold the batteries and the reflector and the plastic lens on the front, the bulb, everything was included. So the first thing I did when I got it was very, very carefully disassemble it. And I was very fortunate. Although the rubber on this is dry and old, I was able to take it apart very carefully. Now, Kevin, here's one of the first, I told you I want you to zoom in sometimes. So here's where I need you to zoom in. I want you to zoom in if you can. Let me just see. Yeah, I don't know if you can zoom in right on the edge there. Can you see? Can you look on the edge there? Can you see? Does the camera show well? I'll hold it perfectly still. Any cracks? Can you see that rubber is very, very old?
Yes, you can see
the dimples in it?
Yeah.
You see, so that rubber should be dead smooth, but you can see maybe I can squeeze it a bit. The rubber is actually old and dried and cracked. So when I took this apart, I was very, very careful. Technically, it's waterproof. So I did put several inches of warm water with just the tiniest bit of laundry detergent, soft laundry detergent, and I soaked this for 10 or 15 minutes, and I very, very carefully reached in and I was able to remove the plastic lens. And once I got the plastic lens out, it's got a little scratch on it. I didn't notice that before. Once I got the plastic lens out, then the whole mechanism came apart. So now what do you do now? Well, the rubber part, leave it in the warm soapy water. So all the metal's been removed. There's nothing but this rubber sleeve. Okay? And then what you can do, after it's soaked for a while, you want to get all the dirt out. And sometimes the rubber is very smooth, but on this particular item, the rubber has a lot of marks on it. There's printing, and there's a sort of a knurled effect. So take a relatively mild scrub brush, not steel, not a hard wire brush in this case, and very gently but thoroughly scrub all of that. And what happens is you get all the dirt out of all the cracks. So now you get you can see right there where I just scrubbed it actually, you can get a really, really clean, so there's no dirt, there's no marks, there's nothing in there. This is just like new. Old but like new. Now I want to show you something. And this is the kind of thing you'll discover as you're working with vintage gear. This looks green on the outside. I don't know what it looks like on the video, but it's green. This is blue, right? This is green. But take a look on the inside. Can you get inside there, Kevin? You see that? What color is it? Purple. That's actually blue. That's okay. But it's a different color. Now that is the original color. This flashlight, and boy, that rubber in there is actually soft and sticky. This flashlight was actually a blue. It's kind of a not navy and not new, bright new blue, sort of in between. A nice blue. And so this was, but of course it's changed. It's probably been used, salt water, sun, and so on. It's changed a little bit. But you'll discover these kind of things. You'll see, gosh, underneath that metal band on the mask, it's a different color. That's probably the original color. Hasn't been affected by ultraviolet rays, the sun and so on. So this flashlight was actually a medium blue. Now it's turned into a kind of a green color. So you got it all apart, and you let it soak for a while. You've scrubbed it gently, put it back in the soap, and then leave that. Take it out, rinse it thoroughly. Rinse it really, really well. Wash once, rinse 4 times. Rinse it a whole bunch. So all the soap is gone, and then leave it out open like that so as to dry. Now, while you're waiting for that to dry completely, then take the metal parts, if there are metal parts, and be very, very careful with metal parts. The metal in the old days was not particularly good. If it's a cast part, it is not formed but cast, it's almost sure to be pot metal, what we used to call pot metal. Pot metal is junk. There's a whole bunch of metal that was left over from a variety of things, ashtrays and brass pieces and all kinds of junk, and they put it all into a big pot. That's why it's called pot metal, and melt it all down. I have no idea what it is. It's just a mixture, and then they want to make a mold. They pour a mold, and they take something out, and it looks pretty good. You can paint it or whatever, but it's not good. The metal is not good metal, and if you drop it or squeeze it, it'll shatter. So be very, very careful with metal parts. Now this is a formed metal tube, has a spring in the bottom. You see? Nice shiny reflector on the top. Whenever you get a nice shiny surface like this, don't touch it. Don't even touch it. If you touch it with anything at all, then make sure it's a very soft cloth, terry cloth, and very, very gentle. Don't rub it. That is usually a polished surface, sometimes with a nickel or chrome plating on it, and then polish very carefully. But it's usually very, very thin. And if you rub that, you're going to ruin it. You'll lose the gloss. And there's a bit of plastic in there, brassy parts. See the brassy part in there? You can shine that up a very, very little bit, very carefully, very slightly if you want to, with a bit of steel wool if it's corroded. Green or white corrosion, clean that off. Very, very fine steel wool, triple aught it's called. 00, or I don't know if you know how steel wool is, but it's 00 and 0 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You want 00 or 000 or triple or 40, very, very fine, and just very, very gently rub it. Don't rub it any more than necessary. And so there's the inner workings of this particular flashlight. It's kind of neat because it has 2 buttons on the body. You see them on, off, and those buttons, they sit over top of this mechanism right here. You see, listen, on, yeah, off. So 60 years old, and it still works really, really well. Now, once you get this completely done, you've cleaned everything up, plastic, oh, I forgot about the plastic lens. If it's real plastic, just as cast items back in the 50s and 60s were not particularly good, unless they were real cast iron, but there was a lot of pot metal for cheap items. These were cheap. This light, I think, sold for $4.95, brand spanking new. The fact it's worth $100 today has got nothing to do with it. It was cheap. And the plastic as well was not good back then. You know, years ago when I grew up, plastic was, hey, well, plastic, that's plastic. Everything today is plastic and it's good stuff. But it wasn't in the 50s and the 60s, even in the 70s. Plastic was looked down on because it wasn't very good. It broke. And it's because it wasn't very good. It broke. So be very, very careful with plastic stuff. If it's a lens like this, don't rub it with anything. It'll get scratched. Clean it up very, very gently with a fine brush. Okay, so you got it all back together. So now what do? Okay, well, first of all, the metal parts, don't spray them with spray them. Don't do that. Don't spray them with WD-40. Take a cloth, spray a little bit of WD-40 on them, or something similar. It can be something similar to WD-40, a metal lubricant oil, very light, and on a cloth, and then with that cloth, not wringing wet, just moist, then with that cloth, just gently rub the whole thing. So the whole thing is a very, very, very light, not on the chrome, very, very light coating of a metal preservative on it, okay? And then, what do you do with the rubber part? So you got that, don't spray anything on the plastic, no WD-40 on that. I got the bulb, I got the ring for the back. What do you do with the rubber part? Well, for the rubber part, it's very, very difficult to preserve it. There aren't really good rubber preservatives. Most of the rubber preservatives on the market, even today, are based on a petroleum product. Rubber and petroleum don't get along really well. Anything that comes from petroleum and oil-based is not very good. There are some products, though, and if you go looking around, you'll find a rubber preservative, a good rubber preservative that'll work. I'm not a big fan of, don't use WD-40. I'm not a big fan of, a very common one is Armor All. I'm not a big fan of that. But if you look in the right places, you'll find rubber preservative. Well, where do you look? Under this cap. Kevin, take that lid off. One place that you can look, which I found is excellent, go to your local RV dealer. Yeah, your recreational vehicle, travel trailers, RVs, you know, if you go to those places, because those devices, those machines, thank you very much, have a lot of rubber. They have rubber seals on the slide outs, and they have rubber seals on the doors. They have a rubber roof, in many cases. They have a rubber, it's actually a sheet of rubber on the roof of a lot of them. A lot of RVs have a sheet of rubber on the roof. And they're exposed to sunshine and rain all the time, and bird poop and all the pollution. And so the rubber roofs need to be preserved. You don't want to hurt the rubber, but you want to preserve it. So those places, RV trailer places, they have rubber preservative. Good rubber preservative that won't hurt the rubber, will preserve it, protect it from UV and so on. So very, very lightly, okay, on the rubber parts, just take them just like that, a little wee bit. This particular one is a foamy one, so you spray it on, and you give it a quick brush all over, just like that, make the foam disappear, and it disappears right into the rubber, around the end there, don't forget about the end, all the parts, very, very lightly with a relatively soft brush. It has to be enough bristle on it so that it will actually, can you hear that as I'm scrubbing here, Kevin? You can hear me talk, it's really like that. If you want to spray a little bit down inside, in this particular case, I'm not going to bother. And now you'll usually have a fairly shiny finish, but most important, that rubber will be relatively flexible and it'll be preserved. Now, having done all of that, you're ready to put it back together. Now, just for fun, this is just for fun now, Kevin. Up to now, I've been serious. This is just for fun. We're actually going to show you this vintage flashlight, okay? So it all goes like that. And then this mechanism drops in, and of course you have to line up the buttons with the button on the outside, being careful not to touch the lens. And then there's a bulb. The bulb just sits in. It's kind of unique. This is actually kind of neat. Normally the bulb is held in there in some way, but not in this case. It just sits in there. What holds it in place? Well, what holds it in place, this is kind of weird, is the spring that's attached to the lens. Odd, huh? Okay, so you set that carefully on top, and it pushes down on the bulb, and then being very careful, you press the lens into place. And yes, this was a dive light. Please don't break on me now, okay, please, dear. And so that goes around like that, and you very carefully squeeze it down to place. And if you're very, very careful, use a blunt tool, and you can just squeeze it out a bit. I don't want to break the lens if I can avoid it. If I break the lens on this video is ruined. I will throw it away. I won't show anybody. I'll be embarrassed. There you go. Put the ring back in the back, just like it goes, like so. Squeezes back together, right in there, like so. So you have the rubber, the metal ring on the back edge. And I guess you hung it from your dive belt from, and there you go. There's Mike Nelson's flashlight. Wow, look at that. Nice and shiny and preserved, brand new batteries. And you can see how bright it is. I mean, the dive lights back then weren't fantastic. I don't know if this will show. This is my own dive light, which is a fairly new, modern dive light. And yeah, well, you know, what? This was good, man. Look at, I can see. 60 years old. Yeah, bit of a difference. But there you go. Whoops, turn that off. And so there you go. Mike Nelson's flashlight, vintage flashlight, rubber, metal, batteries, bulb. Does it turn off? There you go. A couple of tips on how to take care of vintage gear, and you also get to see a very old Sea Hunt flashlight. I have some ideas. If you have more ideas yourself, if you've had good experience working with some vintage gear, and I know a lot of you vintage divers out there have a lot of vintage gear, and you take good care of it too, let me know. Oh, I forgot to tell you how to store it. We got it all back together, right? Number one, get those batteries under there. Batteries are the worst thing to produce hydrogen gas, and it'll ruin the rubber. So as soon as this is over, I take those batteries out of there, make sure it's all spotless and clean. Then what do you do? What do you do then? Well, the only way you're going to keep rubber safe for a long time is to keep the air away from it. So what you do now, get a zip-loc bag. Now let me tell you a little bit about zip-loc bags. You all know about zip-loc bags. They're made of plastic, and they have a zip-loc on them. And you see, that's it. 2 mil, that's the thickness, 2 mil. A mil is a thousandth of an inch. This is 2/1000 of an inch thick. 4 mil, yeah, it costs 1.5 times as much, and it's 3 times as valuable. 4 mil. Go to your local bag shop. No, we're not talking Dollarama. Go to your local place that makes bags. Get zip-loc bags in 4 mil that will hold the item you're trying to preserve. Put the item in, and then, this is a little too big for this, and then try to evacuate as much of the air as you possibly can. I do this for all of my vintage masks, all my Sea Hunt material. Take it and I draw, pull it. Here's what you do. Here's what I do. Take this, go like that, zip it up, stop before you get to the end, okay? Make an opening. Sometimes I use a plastic tube. I stick a plastic tube down in this opening, and I suck the air up. But watch, even this will work. Watch. Suck the air up. In another 60 years, someone will take that flashlight out. It'll look exactly the same as it does right now. No air, no sun. Don't get it too hot. Keep it someplace cool and dark, and you'll keep your vintage gear forever. There you go. That's long enough. You get the idea. Care. Right materials, warm water, be very, very careful. I hope there was something in there that helps you a little bit with your own personal special vintage item. Talk to you soon, Alec Peirce, Vintage Scuba.